So this brings us to the last part of the groove, which is into the breach. And as you're going into these really stressful situations, how do you handle it? And these situations are unique. In a typical job, you don't have this level of volatility. You don't have this level of emotion. You don't have this level of negativity. When people are under pressure, that's one thing that they do. That's why on exams, you think the average should be 80, but it comes out 70. Under pressure, people don't do their best. And not only that, but what it comes down to is that you're under a lot of stress. And so how do you handle all of it? Your fellow alums, well, they will be. When you graduate, you'll be alums. They come back to me and they said, Dr. Chow, this is hard. Everybody said it was going to be fun. Well, except for you. And it's how do I handle it? And so they're not prepared to handle it. And so some of the techniques that you can use to help you get by this are in this lecture. If you recall from our previous discussions, we talked about how emotion, particularly negative emotions, can really put a drag on your performance, especially your production and your efficiency, because you're subject to how well you handle emotion. And so the third part of the groove is into the breach, and these are the common emotional challenges that you face. If you remember, my roommate at MIT told me that there's a limited number of emotional responses to a situation. And so these are the most common and what you have to deal with. The first one is all of a sudden it hits you. This is just too much. I can't do all of this. And so you see this tremendous problem. And what happens? Remember what I said, what happens when you have too much negative emotion? Typically, it's either freeze or flee. Well, typically people freeze, meaning you find something else to go work on and you don't do what you need to deal with. And then your whole company just has inertia. What you do is pick the top 3 things, put your head down, and take care of those 3 things. After you take care of those 3 things, then you take care of the next 3 things. And next thing you know, you're building up momentum. The things we're going to talk about in this lecture is, first of all, the 3 things in front of you. The gray area. What if I'm in a situation where I don't know where to go? It's a coin flip. I've done all the pros and cons and everything else, and it's not clear to me what to do. And so here's an approach and a technique that you can use to get you past it. Not only that, fear. How do you handle fear? And finally, faith. What's right and wrong? There are too many unknowns. What gets you through this is when you don't have any kind of tangible way to go, is through faith. What you need to do is remember about problem solving. How do you solve a big problem? You break it down into parts. Same idea here. As you see, a lot of the ideas we talk about fold into other ideas. Take those top 3 things and build momentum. Admiral Stockdale, who's one of the noblest men in U.S. history. John McCain, yes, he suffered horribly in the Hanoi Hilton for 5 years. Admiral Stockdale, and keep in mind, this is an admiral. He could have gotten out. They normally trade high-level officers. But he was in the Hanoi Hilton for 7 years. Can you imagine that? 7 years of torture. The nature of things, of being in that prison, is in the face of overwhelming odds, how does one maintain hope in the face of adversity? So how does, someone you're constantly tortured and everything for 7 years take that? And so what Admiral Stockdale did is he realized that nobody's going to hold up against torture forever. So what he told his men is, look, if you can hold out this long, then it's okay to tell them this. What he did is he created shorter-term goals. Because if you look at the enormity of this, there's no way you would survive it. And Admiral Stockdale said something very interesting. They asked, who didn't make it through this? And he said, the optimists. And the reason why is the optimist said, we're going to be home by Christmas. And so then 4th of July would come along, and Easter would come along, and Thanksgiving would come along, and then by Christmas they wouldn't be going home. And then what would happen is Easter would come along, Halloween would come along, and then these men would realize, we're not getting out of here. And so they would just give up and die. And so the way Admiral Stockdale, who believed he had a responsibility to his men, is by giving them short-term goals they can focus on. Instead of being overwhelmed, focus on what's ahead of you. And it's kind of funny, the movie The Martian talks about this. You know, you can look at your situation, or you can go about trying to find a way to survive. Yeah, I kind of felt like they ripped me off. Because I've been talking about this long before The Martian was made. Anyway, what if you're drowning when you're overwhelmed? You just have too much work to do. Engineers get inundated. The instinct is just to get in and fight. But are you tackling the symptoms, or you're tackling the problem? Work smart, not hard. I've never considered myself to be a hard worker, but I've considered myself to be a smart worker. Meaning, all my activities are focused on where am I going to get the most bang for my buck. Now you see this, and this is your problem. How are you going to deal with all those little pieces? In reality, you're dealing with this. When you see nothing but details, and you feel like you're fighting nothing but details, take a moment to stop. Pull back and take a larger view of what you're doing. And a lot of times what happens is you realize, you know something? We don't need to work on this. And all of a sudden, it becomes a lot easier. Again, prioritize your top 3 to 5 things. Here's the other great myth. People who say they multitask, doesn't work. It's inefficient. And the reason why is, remember I said you want people who could be throat cutters, people who finish things. If you're working on 10 things, you finish nothing. And actually it was really funny. I was having lunch with my lab partner from MIT. He, much smarter person than I am. I talked about him with the whole Einstein thing. I really do believe Wayne would have become a Nobel Prize winner if he had focused his life in that direction. But we were talking about time management. He just said, and here it is, Silicon Valley, where everybody's working at least 60 hours a week, and he was working 35. He left early every day to pick up his kids, and yet he got the highest reviews at HP. And he said, this is why I get to leave early. I get my job done. He said, too many people focus on too many things. He said, I focus on what I need to focus on, I get it done, and then I move on to the next thing. And I also did the same thing. Anytime somebody comes to me, oh, I'm working on 8 things, that pretty much tells me you're not working on anything. Better to do a few things well than a lot of things bad. Now, what if we're in that gray zone? And do you know who gets caught in the gray zone? PhDs. There's always a part in the research where they don't know where to go. And they look at all their data and everything, and they can't make up their mind. And they just spin in place. And this is where startups go and get killed. You hit the gray zone, and you don't know where to go. And you don't know what to do. And the decisions are very, very difficult. And so you just sit there and go, ah. What also happens is you start getting into analysis paralysis. You can't make a decision because you don't have enough data. I worked for a company, Draper Labs, and they were always asking and talking about data. In a company I was working with, they said about Draper. He said, how many Draper engineers does it take to screw in a light bulb? And they said, I don't know, we don't have enough data. I actually thought it was funny. But anyway, one thing people do is, well, if it's 50-50, just do a coin flip. And the thing is, they say don't look at it, and you want to see a head or tails, and that's where your true intention is revealed. The weakness is that even if you think that, you still change your mind, and so it's still unsettled. Here's the approach I use that has served me well throughout my career. Regret is the second most common emotion that we express. Regret, and you'll read it in the Duke book, is one of the worst things that people have to deal with because it stays with you your entire life. Make regret work for you. When you reach the gray zones, ask yourself this question. Where do I want to make my mistakes? What can I live with? Meaning if the outcome becomes bad, what can I live with? For example, if I'm putting a ball, is it putt long or putt short? And everybody said, oh, of course it's putt long because you give yourself a chance to win. Well, what if the slope of the green totally tails off? And so if you hit it just a little bit too hard, it rolls off and rolls down the green, and then you have no chance of recovering. And so in effect, it's like if I go for the hole, I could get 1 stroke, but if I make a mistake, I'm going to lose 2 strokes. So maybe you decide I would rather hit it soft than hit it long. All depends on the circumstance. One of the most common problems that you have is, do you listen to your boss or not? When I was in a startup, everybody had an approach they wanted to do. And the COO wanted to do it, the VPs wanted to do it, everybody wanted to do it, except for me and the people who reported to me. And I was in hell because the COO actually came up to me and he said, look, if you go this way, you'll have all the support and we'll let you hire more people and do everything you want to do. But if you don't do it, you're going to be out there by yourself. And so I sat there, I said, I can make my life easy. I can do this. But here was the problem. It wasn't going to work. And because it wasn't going to work, it doesn't matter. I would have everybody's support. And if it failed, everybody will go, oh, it's okay. And everybody would, cover their asses. And I was in hell. I didn't know what to do. And, politically, are you a team player and stuff like that? And so I would be ostracized. And this is why being an innovator is not easy, because you're going up against systems that don't want to change. And that includes systems within people. And so what did I do? I asked myself, where do I want to make my mistakes? Meaning, if this thing doesn't work, and here's the thing, the alternative, the odds were 50-50. I didn't know if the alternative was going to work either. I had no good options. But I knew one thing. I'd rather have a 50% chance than a 0% chance. And so I looked at it as, if I go along with what they say and it doesn't work, I will be kicking myself the rest of my life. Regret will set in. And I'll be angry with myself. Why didn't I trust myself? Why didn't I believe in what I knew? On the other hand, if I do something and I give it my best effort, and I do everything I can and it fails, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You don't win every time. And you do get some things wrong. But as long as I give it my best effort and it doesn't work, I'm at peace with that. By all means, fire me. I failed. And so that's one of the big questions. So I went up against the entire company. Fortunately, I was right. We were successful. My boss just said to me, you have no idea how close you were to getting fired. Another example, this is very common for startups. Do you rush to get to market, or do you do it right, but you might miss the market? What is the right thing to do? Only you can answer it. But here's the thing, you have wisdom within inside you. And that wisdom comes out in the form of intuition. Trust yourself. Every time I've used the gray zone as a way of resolving it, it's always worked out for me. Now, another big thing you fear in startups is fear. And actually, the Greeks recognized the power of fear. If you read the Iliad, Ares, the god of war, has 2 sons. They're both gods of fear. One is Phobos, who is the god of fear and flight. The other is Deimos, who's the god of fear, dread, and terror. Now, fear and flight, meaning here's an approaching army with lots of guns and I've got nothing. You should flee. And so that's actually true fear. Fear is actually productive and helpful. It warns you of danger and you react to that danger. So fear can be productive. However, there's a difference between true fear and anxiety, the people feeling dread and feeling terror. Those aren't actually real things. Those are things that might happen. And so, technically, they're not feeling fear. What they are feeling, though, is anxiety. We have a genetic predisposition to fear. There's imminent danger. This is where we get into the mode of self-preservation, like a car is coming, somebody pulls a knife on you, you're in pain. There's neurotic danger, and that's that genetically all our minds are different, and so you start seeing things that aren't there that other people are seeing, like people who are afraid to get out of their houses. We all have some element of irrationality. At Stanford University, they took a poll of students and asked them what percentage of people who die are dying from unnatural causes, like murder or getting run over by a car. And as it turns out, the students said about 50% of the deaths are like that. As it turns out, the real number is 8%. Very few people die from being shot or hit by a bus or something like that. But the thing is, we blow it up so much in our minds that this is such a scary world that what we do is we overreact to things. Then there's imagined danger, and that's the 53%. And what it comes down to is your feelings versus your physical state versus your emotional state. And also memory can create fear for you. People do a lot of silly things due to fear. The problem is if you're afraid, then you are lunch for every circumstance or emotion. Here's what I told my people. We did not have danger fear, but what we did have was anxiety. And so this is a psychological state. Fear is not based on reality. I had a coach who told me this, and he was actually a psychiatrist also. Fear is something that might happen, not something that will happen. Fear robs you of your life on something that isn't even real. My wife has a condition of lupus, which is basically her immune system is attacking her body. Over the last 17 years, her health is slowly eroded. Her lupus is progressive. It gets into a new system, and it makes life extremely difficult for my wife. And when she first had it, she went downhill very quickly, and she was having a lot of physical problems. And what happened? I got scared. I built my life around my wife. And to suddenly lose what you've been dreaming of your whole life is just very, very difficult to accept. And so I would sit around and I would get depressed and I'd be afraid and I'd be sad. And then one day I slapped myself across the face and I said to myself, what are you doing? And the reason why is I have forgotten the lesson. This is something that might happen. She might die tomorrow. She might die 17 years later. We're actually up to 17 years now. And then what I realized is that every minute I spent being afraid, every minute that I didn't spend with her, it was because of fear. My fear was robbing me of my time with her. And then I felt really stupid. And that's the way to look at fear. It is trying to rob you of your life. Don't let it. One thing we recognize for entrepreneurs is that you're under a lot of stress. And the question is, how do you handle that stress? And what does that stress do to you? And there's a psychological technique called the Alexander technique. I had a tennis coach once who told me about this. And what the Alexander technique is based on is that we internalize stress and we physically build it up to us and it wrecks us. For example, before I went to MIT, I had near perfect posture. And then the stress and leaning over a desk and studying so much. You used to be able to put 10 books on top of my head and I could walk across the room no problem. And now I'm just a mess. The question is under stress, you're more vulnerable to irrational negative thoughts. And you feel bad and crappy. You lost at something, someone let you down, you got dumped. Jealousy is a very big thing. There was someone I knew who became president of a company, and I have to admit, I got jealous. I got jealous because I thought I was a more talented person, and yet they were a president. And so, how do I deal with that? And the thing is to say, everything's fine, I'm okay, and so your first response is to fight what's inside of you. The problem is you're just doing more damage. When things are a problem, don't sit around and just say everything is okay. All you're doing is hurting yourself. Go ahead and feel it. Don't fight it. Get it out. Kick the door, throw things. Rage, but don't hurt anyone. Be pathetic. Be stupid. Go ahead and allow yourself. Say, it's not fair. Why did he get it and not me? Oh my God. And guess what? When you're done, let it go. It's done. You've gotten all the negative energy out of you. Move on. You let yourself feel it, but on the other hand, if that feeling doesn't go away, that's when you need professional help. For example, baggage events for students who did poorly on an exam. The thing to look at in an exam is, if you had another week, could have you done better? And so, accepting the situation and not letting that poor result cause damage to you, I did the best I could. You know, you can't be great at everything, and so that's the best you could do. You can reject it, which is to say, I didn't study enough. But once again, you come to peace with it. If the answer is yes, I could have done better, or you could live with it. And that's saying, yeah, I did the best I could at that moment, but now I can do a lot better. In a lot of different kinds of disciplines, it's all about breathing. And the reason why breathing helps you cope with stress is because oxygen rejuvenates your cells. It lets you focus. When you panic, you lose focus. The way the military has breathing techniques, why do pregnant women breathe? And the reason why is it doesn't make the pain feel any less. What it does do, though, is allow women to focus on something else other than the pain. And that's why they teach women breathing techniques. And the best way to learn to breathe is breathe through your nose, exhale out your mouth. The reason why is when you breathe through your nose, your diaphragm is basically pulling down on your lungs to bring air in. When you breathe through your mouth, it's your lungs expanding and contracting. And as you could see, having your diaphragm move versus your lungs moving, your lungs are going to get a lot more tired. That's why I laugh when I see athletes. They're like, all they're doing is making themselves more tired. The approach is, oh, that felt good. Anyway, your posture. Here's the thing about posture. Look at winners and losers. What happens with losers? They're bent over. The winners, you are up and you are out. One way to check your posture is stand up. And as you're standing up, put your arms to your side and move your thumbs out. What that does is it forces you to stick your chest out. And you're up and you're out and you have good posture. I love that. I love this picture because it's one of triumph. It's one of winning. And not only that, as you can see, she has very good posture. The reason why you need that posture is your body is building up stress. Get rid of it before it starts wrecking you. Have you ever seen children with bad posture? Children don't have stress. That's why you see children, they all have perfect posture. It's really, really amazing. So, now that you know that Dr. Cho practices the Alexander technique, who's managed their stress better? In 2008, Barack Obama, full of hope and vigor, and then what happens? And Barack Obama and I are about the same age. 2016, yeah, being president really did a number on him. And so here's Dr. Cho in 2005 with my lovely bride. And here I was in 2015, 10 years later. Now looking at those pictures, who managed his stress better? Okay, his job is a little more stressful than mine, but you get the point. The way through uncertainty isn't simple or clear. How do you know you're going the right way or moving forward? And you're going through a maze without end. And with so much uncertainty, how do you know you're being effective? And how do you judge what you're doing? Life is not chess. What life is poker. Each decision you make has a weight to it. It's a wager. And this is what Duke talks about in her book. You can't predict what will happen, but it's about luck and skill. Are you successful due to luck, or are you successful due to skill? Skill you can control, luck you can't. We typically try to manage by objective, and outcomes tell us if we're right or wrong. And here's the problem. When you judge yourself by success and failure that way, you don't think about the result, and you don't think about your role. What did you do in the outcome? And so, was I good, or did I just get lucky? And so ask yourself this: did I win or lose due to luck, or did I win or lose due to my own skill? That's what you need to ask yourself. And here are some examples. Motorola thought, we're dominating the cell phone market. And what they didn't realize is that they lucked out. They made the right choice at the time, but then they stopped progressing, and that's what they got killed for. On the other hand, the iPhone, much more thoughtful device. Luck was Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, that she got all that money and everything else. She didn't realize it wasn't due to skill, and so that did her in. On the other hand, the Freestyle Libre. That device pisses me off to no end, because I proposed that device 15 years ago to have in laboratories, and they shot me down, and 15 years later they finally did it. But anyway, that was a well-engineered device, and they took their time, and they figured it out. For those of you who know about the Fire Festival, watch the documentary. It is hilarious. Why? Because Billy, who is the CEO of the company, classic entrepreneur, big personality, everybody loved him, and then you found out he was in over his head. Where skill is about U2 having their tour, which was well thought out, done by professionals, instead of the Fire Festival, which was amateur hour. There are stories that you can't control. Bad luck can mask good decisions. Good luck can cloud bad decisions. Learn what's right. And judge yourself on what you can control. Therefore, if I can control this, then I control the outcome. Which means if I do the right things, then I should have a good outcome. This is what I tell entrepreneurs. And this is the way I did research. Anytime I had questions, especially when you're in the gray area, am I doing the right things or whatever? That's all you can do when there's not a lot of certainty. Ask yourself, am I doing the right things? And if you are doing the right things, then keep going. That's another myth about entrepreneurs. Some people say you have to be successful within 3 years or it's going to go under. There are a lot of businesses that didn't become profitable in the first 3 years. That's the perspective of investors. But what I tell entrepreneurs is look at your company 6 months ago. Are you significantly further along? If the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is no, then it might be time to start folding your tent up. But here's an example of improving the odds of doing the right things. Supposing I want to be in a marathon. So what I do is I eat right and I exercise. If I do those things, it'll improve my chances. Those are the right things to do if I want to win. Relying on yourself. What are the right things to do? For example, I want to become an expert at something. What it requires is study, and through study you can become a master. This is actually a scene I really, really liked in Doctor Strange. Dr. Strange wondered, how do you become a master of the mystic arts? And the Ancient One said, how did you become a great doctor? And he said, through study and diligence. And he said, it's the same way in magic. And so Dr. Strange excelled at those things, so it made sense he would excel at magic. For example, grades, I already talked about this. You want an A. Work harder or accept it. That's what it comes down to. There are some classes in grad school. Here's the thing about grad school and a doctoral program. The time to get rid of you is during your candidate's exam, where you have an oral exam in front of 3 hostile professors. But after that, it starts to become a breeze, because now your minimum GPA is dropped to, as long as you get a B- or better, the course counts. And your GPA doesn't count in anything else. I'll put it this way, my GPA before I took my candidate's exam, when my grades counted, was 8.3 out of 8. I got an A+. And afterwards, when my grades didn't count anymore, I think my GPA I ended with was something like 7.8 or something like that. Yeah, I just went, no. It's because I didn't care anymore. Grades didn't count. So I thought, well, I could work hard and get an A, or I could use that extra time and just do my research and graduate earlier. I decided to graduate earlier. And so I didn't study for an exam. I mean, it's a final exam. I didn't study. I was studying for the exam while I was taking the exam. It was awful. And I was thrilled to get a B-. And that's where, if I had another week to study, could I have done much better? Oh, hell yeah. The worst thing is when I was taking the exam is I was sitting there looking and thinking, I think this is easy. Damn it, why didn't I study? And what ended up happening is I ended up passing. And I was thrilled with it, because the answer is, yeah, I could have done better, but do I care? No. And that happens sometimes. I know in times in my class students aren't interested or whatever, and that's fine. But here's what I would ask for. If that's your approach to this, then when you don't do well, don't blame me. Because anytime you have teaching, you have a student-teacher contract. And that contract is I'll meet you halfway, but you have to meet me halfway. Is what focusing on the right thing means is, given the same circumstance, you would make the same decision again. It removes regret, hindsight. If you have to fundamentally believe when you're working in the unknown, if you do the right things, the right outcome will happen. I am going to make my own luck. And this is what faith is about. If you can't believe this, you have no business taking on the endeavor. You have to have faith. It's actually pretty funny, because I was part of a startup and we had these 2 LDS employees. And so they didn't work Sundays because they were in church. And my boss hated them because he thought they should be out there. And he just said, I just hate religious types. And I was exactly the opposite. I love religious types. And do you know why? Because you're people of faith. You understand exactly what I'm talking about. And so I would rather trust somebody like that than somebody who never has had to have faith in something before. You have to be able to persevere. Where do you get your answers? You have inner wisdom. Due to your experience, your intelligence, and reason, not only can you make judgments, but you can make good judgments. There are many times people don't trust their inner wisdom, but you have it. The question is, do you believe in it? This is why the Fire Festival turned into a disaster. People didn't trust their inner vision that there was a problem. If your voice speaks, listen to it. And so that brings us to the end of the groove. I hope someday you'll implement these things. This is why I do the diaries, so at least you could try to integrate it into your lives. And if you have any questions, please let me know.